Welcome to the Human Advantage podcast, where culture is created, not claimed. We've been talking about culture for years, but most companies still reduce people to check boxes that are supposed to define an entire human being. We hire for familiarity, we reward sameness, and then wonder why teams struggle. The problem isn't talent, it's the system. And this podcast is about changing that. Diversity beyond checkboxes, culture add over culture fit, and how people think is the real differentiator. Because people aren't categories, they're the advantage.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Human Advantage podcast. I'm your host, Adam Kleckner, joined by Tia Kleckner today, and our guest, Becky Curran, who is a disability inclusion advocate, international TEDx speaker, senior director of stakeholder engagement, who is redefining disability through lived experience. Becky has spoken at more than 650 venues around the world, helping people and organizations rethink disability, accessibility, representation, and belonging. Her work is deeply rooted in lived experience, and she brings a powerful mix of honesty, humor, and advocacy to the conversation. Today, we'll be talking about what it means to truly be seen, how assumptions shape opportunity, and why disability inclusion has to move beyond awareness into real action. So, welcome, Becky. We are more than excited to have you today.
Thanks so much for having me.
You bet.
Love it. I want to start kind of from the beginning, a little bit of what Adam touched on there. You've spent years advocating for disability inclusion, but the work is deeply personal to you. So let's kind of start there. And what first drew you or pulled you into this space and advocacy?
I always like to give a description because I know there are plenty of people who may be listening or watching, even people who are watching behind a screen. You can't see someone's whole physique. So I am a person with dwarfism. I'm only one of 65,000 people with dwarfism in the United States and 1.5 million worldwide. So that means that most parents, when they get the diagnosis, whether it's pre-birth or post-birth, there's fear tied to it. And that fear stems from lack of awareness and representation. So early on, dwarfism has been portrayed as people who can only act as leprechauns, elves, circus characters, and there's not really a lot of positivity when you think of those types of characters. So when a parent is told that their child has dwarfism, of course, they're going to have a lot of fear. And that included my parents. 80% of people with dwarfism are born into families with no history whatsoever. So you go to the hospital and you're excited to meet your newborn baby, and then you're told that they have dwarfism and you have no clue what that is. You look it up, and then you see portrayals of elves, leprechauns, circus characters. So there was fear. And even the people in the delivery room where I was initially born had had no experience seeing a baby with dwarfism born. It took someone else who happened to be in another wing of the hospital to come and give the diagnosis because she had seen one other patient like me in the past.
Wow.
So then the hospital admitted that they didn't have a lot of information, so they sent my parents to a genetic counselor at another hospital once we were discharged. And I did not spend any time in the NICU, so I was with my mom the entire time from when I was born. But there were definitely concerns, and it was assumed that I was having a cardiac arrest, but it was something that was, I don't mean to scare people, but kind of common. Like if they knew that I had dwarfism, it wouldn't be as scary.
Right.
And but that did not lead me to any experience in the NICU. I was with my mom. Maybe nowadays there would be concerns that would lead me there, but that's how it was then. So really minimal guidance, just the fact your baby has dwarfism.
Mm-hmm.
We go to this other hospital as soon as we're discharged, and we get to the receptionist's office, and the receptionist is giving us directions to go meet the genetic counselor. And the genetic counselor was branded as a birth defects specialist.
Oh gosh.
Wow.
So the
Wow.
receptionist gave us directions and said, follow the signs down the hallway that say birth defects. Then you're going to go in the elevator, push the button for the the floor that says birth defects, and then there'll be another sign that says birth defects, and your counselor will be waiting for you. So
Wow.
my parents cannot tell us anything that was said in that meeting because they were so thrown off. So, of
Yeah.
course, right after they got home, they immediately wrote a letter to that hospital and said that sign needs to be changed. You do not tell people that their child has birth defects when they're coming to
Yeah.
a counselor for answers and trying to
Good
build
for them.
trust. And I tell that story because my parents were always my advocates until
Mhm.
I was able to advocate for myself. And fast forward now 42 years, I was in a hospital room just a few weeks ago because unfortunately, due to my spinal cord injury, I have a suprapubic catheter, which means that my bladder is no longer sterile and I'm prone to UTIs, and sometimes they lead
Mm.
to hospital stays. So I was in the hospital, and the physical therapist told me that they could not meet with me because they were afraid of me getting safely out of bed. The bed height is always going to be an issue because I will always be a little person, but I need to get out of bed. The past 2.5 years, I've been recovering from surgery, and the priority is to stay as active as possible. So
Right.
I found myself speaking up, very frustrated with them limiting me without even understanding the whole picture. And it was pretty powerful watching my parents in the room with me just sit back and let me do it on my own. They then asked me kind of after how it went, like, did I expect them to speak up? Like, how should the conversation have gone differently if I needed it to? But it just felt powerful that they believed in me enough to advocate for myself, but they were there to support me and we're on the same page.
Love that.
Unfortunately, the day after that, it happened again, and
Oh.
my parents did get it's like your blood boils so much, they started to get involved because you did not
Yeah.
tell me that I need to be limited when I need to get out of bed, and I've been
Yeah.
so, like, I tell these stories just because even if I've become my own advocate and I've been old enough to do so, it's important to have allies and those who align with
Yes.
what needs to happen in order to make things better for those who come after me. Like my whole mission in life ever since losing my infant son 4 years ago to an accident at the hospital is how do we
Mm.
make things better so it never happens again to babies like him? And how do we make sure that no patient has to go through what I've gone through? And we're already going through a lot, so just give us some grace and be willing to work with us and make change together.
Yeah, absolutely. You said so many powerful things there, but I do love this kind of full circle moment of your parents being your advocate early on, and that story of them, it feels like something hope I would have been brave enough to do is email the hospital afterwards and be like, take this
Yeah.
shit down. Like
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
stuff needs to
Yeah.
go. But the fact that they're still advocating for you, but you in turn, obviously we've connected before, and I follow your stuff on LinkedIn and see your posts, and your advocacy work is inspiring so many other people. So I love seeing that full circle moment of you kind of becoming the advocate while that your parents were for you. And so I think there's a lot of beauty in that story. But I will say my degree is exercise physiology. My earlier career was working with a lot of PTs and chiros. I'm still blown away by the fact that those are the responses you're getting in the hospital. So I
Right.
have to put that out there that I'm like, what is
Right.
what is happening? Like that's my background, and I'm like, this is absurd.
Yeah.
So I feel you on that. I feel
Well,
you on
even
that part
even
too.
when I was discharged from the rehab, it would have been April of 24. So my surgery was August of 23, April of
Yeah.
24. They're like, you're done. You can do all the home exercises. I knew I
Yeah.
couldn't do the home exercises. I needed accountability partners. So
Right.
Crazy.
even though it was a big investment, I booked my own physical therapist for the past year and a half to make sure I
Smart.
continue to keep up and added
Yeah,
boxing and distance racing, just
I
walking.
love it.
I'm not a
Yeah.
runner, but I'm
Yeah.
getting
No.
out there, staying as active as possible so I don't go backwards. So then when you have a
Yeah,
Yeah.
hospital stay up to a week or so, you then feel like you're going backwards if they don't
yeah,
Yeah.
help you move.
yeah, but that is the power of you becoming your own advocate, right? The fact that you
Right.
took that into your own hands, the fact that and I think there's so much power to that, and I think, I didn't realize the rarity of dwarfism and that it's only 1 in 65,000, but your story resonates so much with what we see across corporate cultures and corporate communities of the stigmas attached to certain things and babies being, younger kids getting autism diagnosis and the fear that goes along with that. Or I
Mm-hmm.
remember when I was diagnosed with severe ADHD when I was, a kid, like, what does that mean? What does this look like? And then flip side of that, my mom being diagnosed with ADHD at 40, right? And being like, well, this explains so much, but where was this when I was younger? And I think there's still so many of those unknowns when you get that original diagnosis and fear that goes along with it because we haven't learned to communicate those in a way that's like, this is okay. Like there's a normal life behind this. There's processes that can make this acceptable across, workplaces, across, schooling, everything. There's resources available, but I think that initial diagnosis becomes just fear. And I'd love to see that
Yeah.
change.
And especially if the physicians are fearful. So
Yeah.
Right.
I recently got a new condo, and my realtor was pregnant, and she found out that her baby may have dwarfism. And immediately
Mm.
when she gets that diagnosis, they're telling her all the ways that she can change the
Mm.
future for that child. And crazy enough, the baby didn't even have the diagnosis once they were born.
Wow.
Oh,
Wow.
interesting.
But
Oh my
she
gosh.
still was given all of this advice that I don't think was great advice.
Right.
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 So
Yep.
now I'm trying to trace back to where's that information coming from, and is this happening to more than just her?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether the diagnosis is real, like they should not be feeding information, like brainwashing and filling families with fear before the experience even happens.
Totally. Totally. And this kind of reminds me of something I remember you saying or reading a post of yours a long time ago. It stuck with me. You said something of what you see becomes what we believe is possible, right? And
Mhm.
so I love that line. It stuck with me, and I'm curious to hear how that has kind of how that's represented or shapes the work you do now.
I think the early on, so the beginning of my career was in the entertainment industry, working behind the scenes. I never had a
Yep.
desire to be an actor, but I wanted to influence the content that was being put
Yeah.
out there.
Yep.
And one of the reasons I wanted to do that is I didn't see myself represented in a positive light. But I
Right.
also have had conversations with people that assume that they needed to be represented in order for them to know what's possible. Like a young
Mm.
deaf boy came up to me and he heard a story about a deaf adult and said that he didn't even know deaf people became adults. And hearing more and more of those
Wow.
stories, it made me realize how much people rely on the entertainment industry and the content that's pushed out there, and it
Right.
impacts whether or not they decide to lead fulfilling lives. If you
Yeah.
grow up in a family where you have a strong support system and you're given the belief early on that you can do anything you put your mind, heart, and soul to, then that's a different scenario than the media is where you go for an escape if you don't have a strong support system, and that's what you're relying on to tell the story of your life that you may or may not hope to have.
Yeah.
So that was early on, and then I think because I had such a strong support system at home, I wasn't going to let what's represented or lack of representation define my future.
Mm.
So I decided after about 5 years working in a talent agency, about a year working in casting, and really trying to influence who they actually put on screen,
Yeah.
I got fed up because the entertainment industry is so image driven, all about the money, want to have name actors play roles that are described as disability. They don't know that lived experience.
Yeah.
I thought, even if the entertainment industry has such a strong reach, why don't I figure out how many people I can reach personally? And
Mm.
that's started speaking in schools, speaking to kids about what it means to be different, letting them ask me all the hard questions, talk to the administrators, tell them the accommodations I had growing up. So when another child with dwarfism or any type of disability comes through those doors, they feel welcome and included.
Yeah.
Love that.
And
Love
I
that.
love speaking to schools, but I also know just sustainability. It's important
Yes.
to kind of have a diverse portfolio. So
Yep.
that's when I discovered the need for people to learn and grow in corporate America space.
Mm-hmm.
And people are ready, willing, and able to make change. They just want to know how. And it's
Right.
Yes.
encouraging storytelling. The more storytelling we can get at the highest level of an organization, the better we are, because then that highest level can influence the decision making that happens at the bottom, the people who are in talent acquisition and making the hiring decisions.
Yeah.
If the CEO is saying, I want more people with disabilities, that's going to be a priority. But if
Yep.
they're like, I want everyone to look pretty, that's going to be
You're right.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother issue. Well, even
right.
Yeah.
after doing all these speaking engagements, whether it be to, these C-suite leaders or to students, what do you think is still the most misunderstood about those with this disability?
It's a known fact that only 25% of disability are apparent, meaning you can see them,
Mm-hmm.
and 75%
Hmm.
disabilities are non-apparent, meaning you can't see them. So people see how the 25% chance is treated in society, and they don't want to be treated like that. They don't want to feel exclusion or isolation. So they were going to do whatever they can to hide their differences unless it's
Mm-hmm.
really going to impact the way that they are able to do their job or fit into certain environments. Everyone wants to fit in. Nobody
Yeah.
wants to stand out.
Yep.
And it's that risk. Do I tell them that I need this accommodation? Am I risking getting fired? I think
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's the biggest fear, and then it comes down to someone's livelihood.
100%. I think fired or even treated differently, right? Or being looked
Mhm.
at as the pain, or oh, we have to do this or we have to do that. But I think it's interesting when you talk about the invisible disability side too, because we talk a lot about that on the neurodiversity side, where I'm like, you go to the grocery store, data suggests at minimum 1 in 5 people in that grocery store are neurodivergent. You just don't know who, right? You would
Mm-hmm.
you would never know who.
Yeah.
And I think, and I was at a summit with Microsoft last year, with the accessibility team, and one of their leaders, I believe he has ALS, was talking about it's something that has always stuck with me, that we're all going to be disabled at some point in our life. Some of us just get there sooner
Mhm.
than others, right? And he's like, think about your
Yeah.
parents as they age, they lose their hearing, or you lose your sight, or God forbid you get in a car wreck tomorrow and you break a leg or whatever. And so I think people don't realize, just because it doesn't impact them today does not mean it won't tomorrow or a year from now or
Yep.
10 years from now, or it doesn't impact somebody that they love and somebody or that's close to them. And I think it impacts so much more of the workforce than we will ever realize.
Yeah, and even I'm guilty as someone with multiple dimensions, especially as I've been exploring the past 4 years in my,
Hmm.
very stacked together major life experiences. I cannot deny that I have dwarfism and I also have mental health conditions
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
and it's only something that I've addressed or even brought in professional support via a psychologist since the accident happened 4 years ago. Like, before that,
Right.
and maybe it was just the way I was raised, it was like, you don't go to external help, you just get the support
Mm-hmm.
in your family. But you cannot say that people with dwarfism or any type of disability, especially those that you can see, don't have a mental health condition, because we're constantly reminded that we're different, and this world is not a
100%.
world that was made for people like us because we're othered.
Right.
And
Yes.
I often
Yes.
think about how I could have benefited from therapy a lot earlier than 4 years ago, but it's kinda you wait to those tragic life events and you're like, "Oh, shoot." But even prior to that, I had some colleagues who had come out with their mental health journey stories. They don't have physical
Hmm.
disabilities, but they shared their stories, and I always feared, like, the stigma around it and how people would just maybe give them a little bit more grace and space and not hold them as accountable as I felt like I was being held. I feel like with the physical disability, the obvious difference, I've been held to a standard of you must try 10 times harder than the person next to you because
Mm.
you have to prove yourself more than anyone else that you belong and that you exist in this environment. So when I saw a little bit of, okay, we're going to give that person space, it was hard for me to digest. But then, of course,
Right.
after my life event, I was like, okay, space is nice. But then when you're feeling during that time, like I kind of call this my comeback time, where I'm like finally feeling myself again, you want to be brought back in to all of those
Right.
conversations. And
Right.
it's a little tricky because sometimes those conversations have been happening now for a while, and you're re-entering and you're like, where do I fit in? So it can
Yeah.
feel very isolating too once you become more open and honest about your story and where you are at any point in time.
Totally. I think that's where community becomes so important in this space,
Yeah.
and acceptance. And, I want to go back to kind of the workforce side because, we hear a lot of companies talk about inclusion and, it was kind of a buzzword for a while, but I don't think everybody really understands what that actually looks like day to day. So, in your opinion, like what does disability inclusion look like in practice?
I love to use the example of like Microsoft, who you mentioned before. So
Hmm.
Satya Nadella is the CEO, and he has two children with significant disabilities. One,
Yep.
unfortunately, has passed away, but he has dedicated his mission to make sure disability is included. And in his
Yep.
organization, they have all different disability areas that someone could work in. It's not just that it falls in the diversity department or in human resources. It's
Yes.
in finance, it's in marketing, it's in accounting, it's in HR,
Absolutely.
it's across the enterprise. And they even have employee resource groups related to disability across the enterprise. So it's not just under one function and just forgotten about or just
Right. Yep.
and that's what needs to happen. Disability needs to be across all aspects of society, and it needs to be a topic that we talk about often so people don't feel left behind. And I think a lot of like the questionnaires out there are intentional when they ask questions about like, does your diversity statement include the word disability? Because if it doesn't,
Yeah.
then the community continues to feel left behind. And you
Yep.
need to make sure that you're including disability. And during today's times, people are afraid to use certain terms, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
when you say inclusion and diversity in the broadest sense possible, you're too broad because you're not
Right.
explaining what that means. I've
Yeah.
heard companies before tell me, oh, we're just working on people of color and women for now. We'll get to the other demographics.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if you're going to implement these strategies, there's nothing that should stop you from looking at all areas. And there are
Yeah.
women with disabilities and people of color with disabilities.
Right. Yep.
So
100%.
They intersect.
even if you are just focusing on those areas, because that's how you want to get started, make it known that that community is still included in some
Yeah.
way.
But I think what you touched on there is so important because you of the Microsoft example that they're across multiple different domains and multiple different, subcategories, industries, HR, finance, engineering, etc. We've had conversations on this podcast a lot about how diversity can't just be bolt-on programs. It can't just be,
Right.
oh,
Yeah.
we have because we see it all the time. Some of it I feel like is a CSR initiative, a feel-good story. Some has impact where, they have a separate neurodiversity hiring program, but then and there's 0 roles open in it. Then you look on their main page and there's 200 engineering roles open, and you're going, well, if you don't think out of 200 engineers, some might be neurodivergent, you either don't understand neurodiversity or this is just a CSR initiative, right? And so I
Mm-hmm.
think building that foundational layer and companies building inclusion and diversity and disability and accessibility into the core fabric of their company, that's where I think the next wave needs to go instead of continuing to just bolt on these programs. Because I think the more programs you bolt on, the more you end up othering people and being segregating people instead of actually building an inclusive culture.
And I don't think we should do away with it, but
No.
even no, when we think about like the different months, like July is the anniversary of
Oh,
the Americans
yeah.
with Disabilities Act, or
Yeah.
October is National Disability Employment Awareness Month. Like, we need to still have the programming year round. Like just because
Right.
100%.
put
Exactly.
together the
Yeah.
budget to do an event during this month to check the box, like how do we make sure that disability is part of all the other conversations too?
Right.
Yes.
Well, a lot of these programs too, it's been a big focus on representation, but the inclusion piece has been missing behind that. So
Mhm.
especially from a disability lens, where do you think companies can get the inclusion piece beyond just representation?
I think just the open honesty of like, I met someone, I actually went to the World Happiness Summit. It was probably about 8 or 9 years ago, and it was in
That sounds
Miami.
fun.
I
I
know, I'm
like the
like,
name
wait
of
a
that
minute.
summit. Yeah, how did I miss
You
this
should
one?
you should look it up.
I
So
will.
this one is in Miami, but they've had it in other places. So they had a lot of researchers who speak on the topic of happiness, and there was someone there at the time. She was working at Athleta, the brand under
Hmm.
Gap. And I was fascinated by what she had to say when she was talking about the format of their interviews and how she immediately asked someone just how they're doing and really get rid of the elephant in the room rather than just diving into the questions and having it be so awkward, because I know what it's like to
Yeah.
be on the other side of that, where people don't want to know how I'm doing. And then I watch them shake in my presence while they're trying to ask me interview questions for an
Right.
interview that I'm qualified for because my resume got me in the door.
Right.
Right.
And
Right.
if we could have just had a nice conversation and maybe it would come out that we have something in common and
Hmm.
Yeah.
we could go into the interview with a little bit more relaxation because we've gotten to know
Yeah.
each other. Even if it's just
100%.
how's your day going? And you know what happened? I was going here and this happened. And they're like, oh my God, that happened to me too. Uh,
Yep.
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 I had an experience yesterday. I was going to a lawyer's office just for fun paperwork, and
Yeah.
it was in a building that just is very old in Beacon Hill of Boston, and I was using a mobility scooter and trying to figure out how to get in the elevator. And when I get in the elevator with the scooter, I have to turn a little bit in order to push the button to get to the floor. But because I turned, I was in an awkward situation to then get out of the elevator because it was so
Mm,
small.
right.
So I found myself having to go back down to the lobby. Luckily, there was a maintenance guy I could get a hold of, and then he comes up with me to the 11th floor. But then he's fighting the door because it's like not we're opening
Oh
or like
no.
not staying open. Like I feel like all
Yep.
these elevators have certain
Yeah.
timers, so I can't get out fast enough.
And they're never long enough. I can tell you that. They
Yeah.
go
No.
way too quick. Yeah.
And we're
No.
finally maneuvering the scooter and got it out. But just thinking about even when I was in LA going on interviews up to 4 times a day, like all those little things that could happen. But if you had someone you could talk to about it, to just like laugh it off. And
Hmm.
Yes.
actually, that experience also shows like a sign of strength and tolerance and like
Yeah.
Right.
not going to let
Yep.
it
Yeah.
ruin my day. Like, even though it really was scary feeling stuck in an elevator, like I'm going to figure it out.
100%.
And
Yeah.
my solution
100%.
was I was just meeting the guy to fill out paperwork and then I was leaving. So I had the guy who was helping me then push the button in the elevator so I could just stay straight and then get straight
Yes.
Just
out
go
on my
on.
way out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So problem solving, like all those different skills, like if someone just cared enough to say, how was your day? Like, what did it take to get here? It could just be a much more robust conversation that could
Yeah.
then lead into some of the strengths that can be displayed.
Yeah. I think 100% because it's such a simple concept that
Yeah.
isn't deployed enough. And that's, I have these fears around these AI screening interviews and all of this stuff. And I think we have to get back to conversational interviews, and that's one of the things we talk about a
Mhm.
lot. And when we're working with other companies and we ask them, well, what's your interview process? And they'll be like, well, we just keep it the same for everyone, so it's fair for everyone. And we have to have that conversation, like, well, that's fair for the one subset that fits that interview process. There's a lot of downstream effects to this, like pulling out the same neurotype for every role, like groupthink, lacking innovation, all of these things, but realistically, you're going to find so much more out from a person by just having a simple conversation
Yep.
first, right? Just person to person. And I think, you've stated a lot, like you've shared that true belonging happens when people are seen for who they are, not defined by how they appear. And I think you can get to that through just conversation, right? And I think I'm curious to know, like, what other assumptions or what assumptions have you had to push back against throughout your career because of people not living by that motto?
Well, I think because I'm 4 feet tall, people assume even as a 42-year-old adult that I'm a child. So I've heard
Mm,
people make comments like, I didn't know she could have an adult conversation. Like,
Oh
really? Oh my gosh.
gosh.
Oh my
Oh
gosh.
my gosh.
so they assume that
Brutal.
you have additional cognitive disabilities, even
Crazy.
you can, but I
Yeah.
don't. But all
Right.
the assumptions, it's assumptions need to be turned into curiosity. Like, how do you
Mm,
frame it where instead of making a statement and an assumption, you just interact with the person and learn? I think
Yes.
one of the biggest struggles, especially when it comes to advocacy and education, is people are so fearful or feeling shameful about mistakes they made in the past with maybe a negative interaction with someone who had a disability, and they're afraid of making that same mistake in the future. And I really want to try to tear down that wall and figure out, how do we just work together to do better? Yes, there have been
Yeah.
some terrible things that have happened in my life, and I don't want to forgive people, but I've chosen to forgive people in certain situations because it's the only way that we can learn and grow together.
yeah.
And I think the more we can emphasize that at the end of the day, we're all human, we all don't make it out alive. Like,
Yeah.
how do we emphasize that more to prove to people like we just need to be kind to each other? Because people
Hmm.
are missing
So
out
true.
on a whole population of people who just want to be part of society. Like, I've had 9 surgeries in my life, which doesn't include the C-section for my son, but so I guess 10, and
Yep.
we don't often talk about them, and I've been more transparent about it because I'm like, I wanna talk about it because I want to normalize it, if normal's
Yeah.
even a word. But we don't want people to feel bad for us. We just want them to give us a chance to participate in society in a meaningful way. And I do want to be held accountable. I tell people all the time, lay it on, because I also
Right.
don't want to get away with things that I shouldn't get away with.
Yeah.
Right. Right. What would you want leaders to understand about kind of that emotional labor of constantly educating others? Because a lot of what you're telling me is, you're educating, you're really advocating, but there's got to be a toll
Yeah.
emotionally that comes from that as well.
I broke down to my psychologist yesterday, and I don't do it often because I try to be so strong. But I think the hardest part is that people don't understand that we have more in common than differences
Mm,
if we just learn to accept it.
Yeah.
And when I have been able to get the ear of a senior leader, I've been able to build a meaningful relationship. Um, there was someone who I worked with when I was at the talent agency early in my career, and he was an agent. So it was one of those situations where you feel like those executives are untouchable and you can't really interact with them. But it wasn't
Yeah.
till later in life that we've been able to build a stronger relationship. And I truly believe that no seed goes unplanted. So even if you meet
mm,
someone for a little bit, um, he then came and watched me do my 5K goal in San Francisco in November,
Oh,
flew up from
amazing.
LA, and
I love
we've
that.
been able to have some deep, honest conversations just about humanity.
yeah.
And he's also found himself working on projects that include the disability community. He worked on the movie Champions and has now become friends with a lot of people with Down syndrome who are a big part of his life. And I think it's important to also view like celebrities and executives as human beings. So
Hmm.
I don't want to
Yes.
just put the onus on the executives because I think they also have some feeling of isolation as well. And maybe it would be
Yeah.
nice if they admit it a little bit more.
Right.
But
Yeah.
how do we create relationships no matter what your title is? And I think that's
Mm,
another thing you learn as someone with a physical disability. You're like, the worst that can happen is they can say no. I could say, oh, I
Right.
want to meet this person. But how do we, yeah, put work and titles aside? Yes, people earn titles, work hard to get to certain levels, but how can we just be more human towards each other and not
Mm-hmm.
act like, oh, I'm better than you because I come from this certain lifestyle and I should not be in a room with you because you just got here and you have no experience. Like,
Yeah.
that's the diversity we need. We need people to be willing to be in a room with someone who is starting at the bottom and just wants guidance. Mentorship is huge. But I think
Yep.
another struggle with mentorship, especially those with set timelines, those types of programs, I think they're quick to be like, okay, let's get you on to the next so then you can mentor someone
Yeah.
else. But when
Right.
my dad asked me a long time ago if I really wanted to commit to be a mentor to someone, it was through this program, Communities and Schools in Los Angeles. He said, when you're committing to being in her life for a very long time. And that stuck
Mm-hmm.
with me because I feel that there are so many programs out there that are probably money driven. Okay,
Yeah.
sign up,
Yeah.
we'll pair you with
Well,
someone.
there's a ton that are 6 weeks, 4 weeks, three
Right.
weeks. And it's
Yep.
like,
Yep.
how do you make an impact in that amount of time?
So
Yeah, I think spot
how
on.
do we get more long-term relationships, but we don't want it to feel like an inconvenience. Like we
Right.
want it to be natural and flow. And yes, if you really find out that it's not a good fit and you need to be repaired, that's different than okay, we did this great thing for 6 months and now we aren't going to stay in touch.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, we checked the boxes. Now let's move on to the next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that those models need to be reevaluated because I don't think anyone ever stops needing a mentor.
Totally,
No.
totally. And I think that goes for the, disability community and not, right? I mean, so many
Right.
young kids coming into college, coming out of college right now, fearful of what the workforce is going to look like. I mean, I
Mhm.
think it's just so important to give back. And it's kind of funny, I mean, not to tie this back to the name of the podcast, but the human advantage is what we named this thing. And I think what we're really talking about is coming back to being human, right?
Yeah.
Just treating other people like humans. And it sounds so simple, but in today's day and age, it feels like it's harder than ever, for a
Yeah.
lot of people. And
Yeah.
it's like, I think that's such an important message, Becky. It's like, we just got to get back to being humans. Like, it's,
Mhm.
care for one another, show empathy, show curiosity. Like, it's those things take practice, but I think the reward is tenfold.
Yeah.
And it goes a long way. People remember
It
you.
does.
Yes.
They
It
it,
does.
and they can call on you at any. That's why I always like to say the no seed goes unplanted because I feel like even relationships I made 40 years ago, maybe we weren't that close, but all of a sudden an opportunity comes up and I just keep my door open for opportunities. And it comes to a time where you have to time manage and figure out what your priorities and goals are and making sure things align. But it's important to keep doors open because even if one opportunity doesn't work out, there could be more in the future.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
100%. 100%. All right, I'm going to shift gears to how we kind of like to end this thing. So we usually end with a little lightning round, and Becky, no pressure because nobody keeps this to one word or one sentence, including myself. But we'll do a little quick lightning round where if you have a word or a small phrase for each one of these. So what is one myth about disability that you wish would disappear?
That people with disabilities aren't capable.
Yeah,
Mm.
it's
Yeah.
it's such an easy one to say, but such a one that does not get practiced enough. I think that's great. One accessibility practice every workplace should adopt.
Intentionally use the word disability in all of your communication.
Yeah.
Even
Love
if
that.
it has nothing to do with diversity, just use it wherever you can. And don't
Yeah,
dance around the word disability. Ability, different
yeah,
ability. Like, let's strengthen the word disability so we can come together as one.
Oh,
yeah.
I love that.
Super powerful. So kind of on that one, one thing that companies overcomplicate about disability and inclusion?
I think the number one requested training is related to disability etiquette and terminology because they're afraid of
Mm.
offending. So
Mm,
people are stalling from doing the real intentional work because they're afraid of saying the wrong thing. So instead of ordering trainings like that, why don't we order trainings that are how do we dive in now and just get messy and figure out how to make
yeah.
mistakes and do whatever we can to be intentional and inclusive. Make sure that people with disabilities are not just getting hired in entry-level jobs, that they have the path
Mm,
Yeah.
to move up within an organization, because it should
Yeah.
not be assumed. I think alongside the capable thing, it should not be assumed that people just want to be entry-level job people for the rest of their lives.
Yep.
right.
Yep. Well, and I think people don't realize how many executives fall into that bucket, whether it's,
Right.
again, physical or seen or not seen. But we've had VPs of engineering on this pod. We've had a bunch of C-suite, senior leaders who, are neurodivergent or who think differently or have different ways that impacts their life. And I joke all the time, I'm like, Silicon Valley was born out of neurodivergence. Like that's the
Yeah.
reason those companies exist, right? Is people, and so I think normalizing the conversation around this isn't your entry level worker. This isn't just somebody who can come in and push buttons, like high level capacity ROI lives in this space as well.
Exactly. And there's a history of people with disabilities getting paid less than minimum wage, so we need to nick that in the butt too.
Yes, we do.
Oh,
Yes, we do.
yes.
Yes, we
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
All right, one more here. What's one word to describe true belonging?
It's a really good one.
That's it's a tricky one. It could be a couple words.
Um, so if it's a couple of words, it would be you belong here. So you belong
Yeah,
in this environment, wherever it may be.
I love that. Yeah, it's so simple, but it's funny because I know you kind of qualm over that one, like, you belong. I'm like, but that is a powerful statement. It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it means so much to people who are told otherwise
Right.
for many years.
Hmm.
All right, I will end it with our final question. What is one thing that's essential to who you are as a person and what you bring to the workforce, but it would never show up on your resume?
I think the layers of compassion and empathy that have been built since losing my infant son to a tragic accident at the hospital,
Mm,
Jackson will always be with me, and he won't necessarily show up on my resume, but he is a part of everything I do and the legacy I want to leave behind on his behalf. And I'm reminded often that it needs to be on my behalf as well. But really, how do we create a world that would have been better for him to grow up in and survive in until it was
yeah.
actually time to go?
Yeah,
Right,
no,
right.
that's powerful, and I think our kids have so much with how we want to shape the future. I know T and I same way. But Becky, I want to thank you for coming on this because I think these conversations are just important for people to hear. But I think too, one thing I take away from these conversations is building these systems doesn't have to be overly complicated a lot of times.
Wow.
It's the little actions, it's the simple things we can do day to day that make such a big impact. And I think you have such a good way of portraying that and clarifying that, like, you don't have to break down your whole company and rebuild it to start being
Right.
more inclusive, right? It's little actions, it's little things, it's little bits here and there that can make the world of a difference. And I think people listening to this will really take that away.
I love that. And yeah, just let people show up as they are, and you'll be surprised how much can be accomplished.
I love
Yeah.
that. All right. Well, until the next one, we are looking forward to it. Thanks so much, Becky, for taking the time today. We really enjoyed it.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Becky.
Thank you.